Well, hello there, journeyers. How are you today? Alexis Brooks here from Higher Journeys, back with another episode of Conscious Commentary. So glad that you are tuning in to this little podcast where I like to kind of weigh in on sometimes it's current events, things that are happening in the news of the moment. Sometimes we like to go a little bit off the radar and talk about some things that are not necessarily, not at all, really, in the mainstream news, but things that us journeyers like to delve into. So today we're going to cover the latter. However, I have to tell you, I was really vacillating all day, not all day because we're still only about the mid part of the day, but vacillating up until this point as to what we're going to discuss today. There are so many topics of interest and of curiosity. And I'll tell you, particularly because I had just completed an interview. If you haven't heard it, you should definitely tune in to my interview with John Rappaport, investigative reporter, where we talked about what may be behind and beyond the headlines with regard to what I'm calling the sexual harassment campaign. And it was quite interesting because we covered the gamut on possible impetuses for this, and I'm calling it a campaign because, every day we've got somebody new coming out or coming out into the news with regard to being accused of some form of sexual assault or harassment. Really something to look at. This is going somewhere, of that I'm certain. I ask that you keep your eyes and ears open, keep your mind open, of course, and just kind of watch as this unfolds and unfurls. I'm going to leave it there. So at the end of the day, I decided not to cover that subject on this episode, but rather something a little bit more esoteric, shall we say, because after all, that's what we love to talk about, isn't it? Although I think there's something very important to be gleaned when we're talking about current events and what may be behind them, because it's still all a part of the journey, the bigger picture, how reality is created and maintained and sustained, all interesting stuff. But I opted to go with the theme of, I'm calling it seeing double numbers and AI, artificial intelligence. Is there a connection? Here's why I'm bringing it up right now. I'm sure many of you had a chance to tune into what was such a fun and intriguing discussion with my pal, Jimmy Church from Fade to Black. I was on his show a couple of weeks ago now, and among the many things that we discussed are the anomalies of reality these days, not the least of which is this phenomenon that used to be called the 11/11 phenomenon. All y'all know what I'm talking about there. But how it's getting deeper, more prevalent among people who are not only seeing the 11s, but are seeing double numbers, including me. We've covered this before on the show. We've covered it quite a few times, but I'm going to bring it up again because I want to propose another possibility for the why of it all. Everybody's that's experiencing this, I'm sure, is trying to assign a definition or a purpose or a meaning to what this is all about. And I dare say, I certainly do not have the answer. I think it could be a number of things, but something intriguing that I don't know we've tackled in this way before. So here goes. I'm going to start by reading a quote that one of quite a few people have sent me after hearing me talk about this publicly and giving me their own little 2 cents or 223344 and so on, how they're seeing these numbers, particularly more recently. Here's somebody that sent me a message from Facebook. I will not mention her name because she didn't necessarily give me permission to do such a thing. But I'm going to read you what she sent to me. She says, "Hi, Alexis. I just wanted to let you know how much I enjoyed your interview with Jimmy Church." She said she was working out in the basement and listening to me talk about how the 11s are back again, as well as the 22s, 33s, 44s, and 55s. She says, "I was saying to myself, yes, because I've noticed the double digits appearing like crazy over the past 6 to 8 weeks. She goes on to say, "When I finished my workout, I came upstairs and glanced at the digital clock on my stove, and it said 11:33. Strange days indeed, she ends by saying. Yep, strange days indeed. Again, the last thing I'm going to do is approach this huge anomaly, what's becoming bigger by the day, with a sense of trepidation or fear, but rather just complete curiosity, wanting to understand what this phenomenon is all about. Here's what I'm going to propose as an idea, just an idea. We are hearing more and more, both in mainstream as well as alternative media, about the proliferation, the expansion of what is called artificial intelligence. That being, rather than a growing organic level of humanity, we're talking about a synthetic, or making the synthetic more of a prominent reality in our world. Artificial intelligence. I got a quote, if I can find it. Let's see if I can find this. I had taken some notes on this. Stanford University had done a paper on, out of their computer science department, on artificial intelligence, and there was an abstract available about sort of a Q&A that was done, and the question simply was, what is artificial intelligence? So it's described in this abstract, published back in 2007 as, quote, it is the science and engineering of making intelligent machines, especially intelligent computer programs. It is related to the similar task of using computers to understand human intelligence. But AI does not have to confine itself to methods that are biologically observable, end quote. That was the answer to the question, what is AI? And I think that last statement, AI does not have to confine itself to methods that are biologically observable, is quite revealing. It's saying that it's a lot bigger than that, and can be. And perhaps they are working to make it a lot bigger. There are the proponents of AI, and there are a lot of opponents in terms of the motivation. Some go as far as saying it will eventually replace humanity, not just emulate it. That's a big thing. Okay. I'm not going to go off on a tangent there, because it's not where I'm going here in terms of drawing a correlation between why we may be seeing numbers, noticing numbers more, and patterns in numbers now, and AI, is I want to take a step back and talk about, this is going to be a little complicated for me because I'm going to try to triangulate here. We're talking about numbers and seeing numbers more prominently in our lives, double numbers in particular these days. We're talking about artificial intelligence. Let me introduce the third component and see if I can tie it together. There are discussions going on across a multitude of platforms, scientific platforms, mainstream scientific platforms, that are postulating the idea, get this, that we may actually, our world, our universe may actually be not what we've been told, but actually a cosmic computer game, a simulation. I've covered this before. In fact, I had an intriguing discussion with Linda Moulton Howe back in May about this idea after she presented a very cogent lecture on this idea that the universe may be not what we think, but rather more of a virtual reality. I think that's intriguing. So this is the third component. We're seeing numbers prominently, playing prominently in our lives. We're talking about this push toward AI. And then the third aspect is what some are starting to discover is that we may actually be living in a simulation. In fact, it was Elon Musk who said, I can't quote him verbatim, but he himself has said, I think the chances are 1,000,000,000 to 1 that we are not living in a simulation. I hope I'm saying that right. In other words, his surmise is that it is most likely that we are living in a simulation. This is just one person. There have been quite a few. In fact, there are some, there's somebody else here that I wanted to quote. It was a pretty well-known computer scientist, actually a NASA jet propulsion laboratory scientist named Rich Terrell, who contends that our creator may just be a cosmic computer programmer. He was quoted in a 2012 article as saying, "One has to think, what are the requirements for God? God is an interdimensional being connected with everything in the universe, a creator that is responsible for the universe and in some way can change the law of physics if he wanted to. I think those are good requirements for what God ought to be," end quote. And then he went on to explain that this is the same as programmers creating simulations. Okay, I'm throwing quite a few quotes out there, and there'll be a couple more. But again, we're talking about a very serious contingent of the scientific community now, I suppose, relenting to the idea that the universe, as we understood it to be, as we have been taught in our world in particular to be, is not at all that it could very well be made up of code. And this is what's going to bring me to the numbers. This is just a hypothesis, guys. Me sitting in contemplations to transform life and realize potential. That's the subtitle to my book, by the way, Conscious Musings. In my contemplation about this, I said, because I've been following this whole, first the AI, the chase for AI, and very openly talking about their plan to implement more of an AI-rich society, as well as this postulate on the part of science that, heck, we could be living in a computer simulation. The world is not at all what we think it is. And now we're seeing numbers play more prominently in our lives. For me, many of you know I've talked about this on many occasions. First it was the 11s, now it's the double digits, and I got to tell you guys, unrelenting. There has not been a break in the action for me in this resurgence of seeing numbers since end of September. We're now moving swiftly toward the end of December, 3 months. Here's the thought that I'd like you to weigh in on, as always. I've talked about the veil thinning, whatever that veil is made of, assuming there is such a thing, a veil that exists between our world and everything else. Or, moreover, what's behind the veil. Is what's behind the veil actually what is cranking out what we call our reality? And if that veil is thinning, might we be seeing, vis-a-vis the numbers that we're noticing so prominently, that we are actually living in a simulation? Do you know where I'm going with this? Why are we seeing, first it was the 11s, and I don't know if I've talked about this publicly, on the record with an interview or not, but I had thought about this idea is particularly relative or relevant to the whole idea of a holographic model of reality, seeing these 11s play so prominently and looking at the structure of binary code, which we know are made up strictly of zeros and ones. And I thought, why are we seeing these 11s so much? But as I was talking about this and writing about this, I was, for quite a few years, really since 2005, I've been seeing them. I had been getting feedback from other people saying, yes, me too, but I'm seeing other patterns of numbers, 222, 1313, 1010, 1111, of course, and so on. Patterns. Are we finally getting to see what this universe is really made of? Is something opening our eyes to it? Okay. Now here's where it's going to get a little tricky for me in terms of explaining how I'm going to triangulate this. I think I'm going to let a quote come to the rescue for me yet again. This is a quote. I love to quote David Icke, man. I think he's got some really profound things to say. He was recently also on Jimmy Church's Fade to Black, I believe, a week and a half after me. And they covered a whole litany of things, not the least of which was this whole idea, this push for AI. And David weighed in with quite a few things. I think it was Jimmy who posed the question about how David felt that, the very things that he was writing about many years ago, including the AI, the push for, not just the push for AI, but the fact that he feels that we're living in more of a matrix-like reality. And now here's the likes of Elon Musk coming out and really corroborating the things that David Icke was saying many years ago. And he really kind of brought it full circle and talked about that. And here's something that he said, where on the one hand, he was very excited to see that the mainstream is starting to give credence to this idea and they're exploring it on a very serious level. He also said, and this is where I'm going to try to bring everything together. He says, quote, "There is, of course, this agenda of artificial intelligence and connecting people to technology." So he's saying, and let me stop that quote for a minute. He's looking at this idea that many other people are now looking at, that we may be living in a virtual, literally a virtual reality. Then you've got this agenda of artificial intelligence, even though, who knows, we may be living in one big artificial artifice anyway. But he says, we've got to watch the double bluff where they say, well, yeah, we do live in a simulation. Let's just make the best of it. He says, we have to be aware of that. We have to be aware of that. So we have a few things going on here that I knew before I got on the air. I'd have to try to bring them together as articulately as I could so that you get the point of where I'm going. We have, on the one hand, this push, I would say a man-made push, or a push that's being promoted by man to lead humanity into a more AI-oriented society. We have this revelation, it would seem, that is coming out on the part of many mainstream scientists who are now saying, yes, we just may live in a simulation. And then we've got the people, which to me is the most important, who are walking the experience of seeing these numbers, bringing this all together. What does this all say? Where are these numbers leading us? Is the veil thinning? As I said, I'm not here to give the answer, but to put the question out there and see what you think. These numbers, for me, for many of you, have been in our face for weeks, if not months, and for many years. But there's been an uptick, no question about it. Does this mean something is about to be revealed to us that's connected to this whole idea of what our universe, the true nature of reality? Are these numbers a sort of foreboding, not a foreboding, but it's sort of a precognition or omen of things to come? Maybe something actually positive and big. I've always said, I don't know if it's good or bad. I know it's big. But I wanted to put this other thing out there in terms of how seeing these numbers so prominently may, in fact, be connected to an artificial reality that we happen to be residing in. Gonna leave it with the question. I hope I wasn't too all over the map for you guys. Of course, there will be a post accompanying this audio, so maybe I can be a little bit more articulate in writing than in words spoken to you today. But I think hopefully you'll get the message. Keep looking. Well, I started to say keep looking at the clock. Actually, don't. Oh, here's something else I wanted to bring up. This is important before I sign off, and I am over, but heck, it's my show. I'm going to go a little over today. In this whole idea of humanity being messed with, just to put it bluntly. Driving humanity in a direction that certain factions want it to go without our say-so. Let's just say that the whole AI push is part of that. Whether you like it or not, we're going to make AI more of a prominent presence in our world. And frankly, I'm seeing the effects of that right now with how tethered people are to their technology. We won't go off on a tangent there today. But in that motivation, and also with the understanding that the technologies that are being utilized today, much of which we're not even privy to yet, here we are seeing these numbers. Not everyone, certainly not everyone, but a lot of people are feeling very, very uneasy about why is it, damn it, that every time I look at the clock and it's now fill in the blank, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, whatever, 5, 5. Here's another question. Could it be that somehow someone or something in preparation toward a more AI-oriented society have managed to entrain our brains to look at the clock? It's not just on clocks, it's on receipts and license plates and signs and other things, but to somehow a sort of entrainment where we are magnetized to look at that time. I wondered that as well. I don't know. I don't have any evidence to just even support that. I could probably find some. But that's another thing. There's something suspicious going on here is where I'm going with this. Is this a completely organic thing? Or is this just the way the universe works? Are we finally getting some answers as to the true nature of reality? Again, I'm going to end with the questions. Let you go on your own journey. Let me hear from you. As always, I'd like to get your weigh in. So, as the numbers persist, and I'm watching them across my computer screen right now, 2211, I get to the point where I just laugh when I see it. And there's sometimes I'll say, well, hello there, 1111, 2222. Look at this. I'm looking at my meter right here. I don't think they're going to go away, but hopefully some answers will come along with our seeing these numbers every place we look. Again, let me know what you think. And we're going to keep this conversation alive because I think it warrants it as this intensifies. And we're also going to come back where we started this conversation at the top of the episode. We're going to keep monitoring this other anomaly of the sustained sexual harassment campaign. Go listen to John Rappaport's interview that I had the pleasure of having him on my last show, if you haven't already. See what you think about that too and weigh in. All right, I'm going to sign off. I'm way over. Always enjoy having you, and thank you for tuning in to Conscious Commentary. I'm Alexis Brooks. I'll talk to you real soon.